So, um, I want to start today by having you just look at the device in your hand
Hmm.
or the laptop sitting right in front of you, because to you, it's a portal. It's how you talk to friends, do your banking, order your food.
Right.
But if you were a systems architect, like someone who actually builds the back end of these things, you wouldn't see a portal at all.
No, you'd see a node.
Exactly. A node,
Mm.
a data collection point, a tiny terminal in this much larger, completely invisible operating system.
And that distinction, between seeing the glossy screen and seeing the actual code running behind the screen, that is the entire premise of the source material we're covering today.
Yeah. We are doing a deep dive into a really comprehensive audit. It's titled The Architecture of Modern Reality and Systemic Truths. And I want to be really precise about that word, audit.
Yeah, it's an important distinction.
We aren't here to do a philosophy seminar.
Yeah.
And we definitely aren't here to discuss, conspiracy theories about guys in hooded robes pulling levers.
Right. We're looking at the technical specifications of civilization. The source material is essentially a schematic.
It really is.
It argues that modern life isn't just this series of random, chaotic events. It's a carefully designed user experience driven by specific inputs.
Biological inputs.
Biological, digital, economic, all of it.
And the central thesis here is, well, it's disturbing, but also empowering. It basically says that most people are just running through life as subjects.
Passive users of the operating system.
Right. Passive users, they eat the food, they borrow the money, they click the link, but they don't actually know how the food is engineered or how the money is created or even how that specific link was chosen for them.
And the goal of this deep dive, our mission today, is to flip that switch.
Yeah.
To help you move from being a subject to being an actor. Because the moment you understand the mechanism, like the actual literal machinery of how these systems work, you stop being a passive user.
You gain agency.
Exactly. You gain technical agency.
So we have a massive stack of material to get through. We're going to audit 5 specific pillars of this reality.
We're starting with the digital layer.
Right. Then moving into the biological machinery of our own bodies, then the macroeconomic engine, the actual physical boundaries of our planet, and finally the societal structure itself.
It's the full stack.
It is the full stack. So let's just jump right in. Let's start with the one that I think people, they generally think they understand it, but the report suggests we are actually like a full decade behind on.
The digital illusion.
The digital illusion.
This is where we have to fundamentally kill the concept of the cookie.
Yeah, because the cookie is the standard mental model we all have, right?
Right.
I visit a shoe store, they drop a little text file on my browser, I leave, and then that text file tells the next site, hey, show this guy's shoes.
That's how everyone thinks it works.
And then if I clear my cache, delete my cookies, I'm a ghost.
Which was completely true in, say, 2010.
Right.
But the report details this massive transition that has happened very quietly over the last few years. We have moved entirely away from stateful tracking.
Which is the cookie, something physically stored on the device.
Exactly. We moved from that to stateless tracking, or fingerprinting.
And this is where the audit gets really technical, which I love. The report uses the term probabilistic fingerprinting.
Yeah.
How does that actually work? If they aren't leaving a file on my computer, how on earth do they know it's me?
It's based entirely on how your specific device renders the world.
Okay.
When you visit a website, your browser doesn't just passively receive text. It has to draw the website.
It renders the code.
Right. And to do that, it uses APIs. Things like the HTML5 canvas or the WebGL context. The website essentially pings your browser and says, hey, draw this hidden 3D cube in the background out of sight, and then tell me exactly how it looks down to the pixel.
And my browser just does it.
It just does it. But here's the catch. The way your specific graphics card, your specific driver version, and your specific operating system render that tiny, invisible cube is microscopically unique.
Like handwriting?
Exactly like handwriting. An iPhone 15 draws it slightly differently than a Samsung Galaxy, which draws it differently than a Windows laptop running a specific NVIDIA card.
So just by asking my computer to perform a basic background task, they get a unique signature back.
Yes. And they combine that graphics signature with a dozen other variables, your screen resolution, your installed fonts, your battery level API.
Wait, pause right there. On the battery level.
Yeah.
Why does the website even need access to my battery level?
Ostensibly, to save energy.
Okay.
The idea is, if your battery is low, the website can check the API and decide to stop auto-playing high-res videos. That's the feature they sell to the public.
That sounds reasonable.
Sure. But the exploit is that your battery level is a high entropy data point.
Meaning it's highly specific.
Right. If I know you have exactly 43% battery, you're running iOS 17.1, you have these 12 specific fonts installed, and your audio context renders sound waves in this exact microscopic way.
The odds of anyone else matching that.
The odds of another human being having that exact hardware and software state at that exact millisecond are nearly zero.
Wow. So I don't even need to make a user account. My hardware literally is my account.
You are the hardware. And this is why incognito mode is largely just theater at this point.
Because everyone uses incognito thinking they're safe.
Right. But incognito only stops your browser from saving your history locally on your own machine.
It doesn't stop the broadcasting.
Exactly. It does not stop your hardware from broadcasting its configuration to the server. You are essentially put it on a cheap plastic mask, but you still have the same fingerprints, the same gait, the same exact DNA. The server recognizes you instantly.
That completely shifts the power dynamic. If the data is being generated by the hardware itself, I can't really opt out unless I just stop using the device entirely.
Which is why the report categorizes this kind of behavioral data not as some digital byproduct, but as a stable asset class.
Stable asset class. I mean, that sounds like banking terminology.
It is banking terminology. Think about the volatility of traditional money. The dollar loses purchasing power every year due to inflation.
Right.
But high-fidelity behavioral data, knowing exactly what a specific human being will click, buy, or fear next, that is predictive. It's a hedge against the future.
So these companies are hoarding data.
They're hoarding it not just to sell a sneaker ad today, but because human predictability is a store of value that is far more stable than fiat currency.
And if that behavioral data is the most valuable asset on Earth, then the entire system is heavily incentivized to maximize the creation of that data.
Which brings us perfectly to the algorithmic echo chamber.
Right. But the report actually frames this a bit differently than the usual political polarization argument we always hear.
It does. We usually hear, oh, the algorithm just shows you what you like. And that's partially true. But the actual underlying mechanism is about reality editing.
Walk me through that. Reality editing.
Okay, think about a physical library. When you go to a library and ask the librarian for a book on the 19th century agrarian economy, she hands you a specific book.
Okay.
If I walk in 10 minutes later and ask for the exact same topic, she hands me the exact same book. The library is a repository of objective, shared information.
It's a static shared database.
Exactly. The modern web, however, is a dynamic reflection. It is not a library. It is a hall of mirrors.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
If you search for the economic impacts of a new policy, and I search for the exact same phrase, we absolutely do not get the same list of results.
Because it's tailored.
The search engine leverages that fingerprint we just talked about to create a custom reality for you based on what will keep you clicking and engaging, and a completely different reality for me.
So we aren't just having disagreements based on differing opinions anymore. We are literally basing our worldviews on completely different sets of base facts.
We are living in bespoke realities, custom built for a demographic of one.
That is terrifying.
And it leads directly into the third part of this digital pillar, which honestly I've found to be the most chilling part of the entire audit. The fragility of history itself.
A digital dark age.
Right.
Which is counterintuitive, right? Because we all kind of assume that because something is digital, it's immortal. You hear it all the time. The internet never forgets.
That's the cliche. But functionally, technically speaking, digital data is the most volatile medium human beings have ever created.
More than paper.
Far more. Compare a digital server to stone tablets or even physical paper books. If a government in, say, 1950 wanted to erase a historical event that was recorded in a book, what did they have to do?
They had to round up the books.
They had to physically seize tens of thousands of copies across the country and set them on fire. It was incredibly difficult, it was expensive, and it left a massive, highly visible trail of smoke.
It required physical violence against physical objects in the real world.
Exactly. But now, if a news conglomerate or a regime wants to change the narrative of something that happened 5 years ago, they just access the database.
They just log in.
They log in, they change a 1 to a 0, they subtly update the phrasing in the article, or they just delete the page entirely. Error 404.
Page not found.
And because there is no physical master copy anywhere, there is zero proof the original version ever existed. The report calls this concept information volatility.
Information volatility.
We are moving into an era where history is no longer a fixed timeline. It is a fluid narrative that can be quietly edited in real time by absolutely whoever currently holds the admin keys.
That fundamentally implies that objective truth is just a variable in a database somewhere.
It is a read-write variable, and we only have read access.
Man. Okay, so that's the mind, that's the information layer.
Yeah.
Let's transition over to the wetware, the actual physical bodies we inhabit.
Segment 2, bioengineering and the economics of health.
This is where we look at the physical inputs fueling the machine. And again, the report really zeroes in on the engineering aspect of this. It's not about bad choices, it's about system design.
Right. It uses the phrase food as a weapon of addiction,
Right.
which, when you first hear it, sounds like absolute hyperbole.
It totally does, until you actually look at the corporate patent filings for these snacks.
Because it's not hyperbole at all, it's rigorous chemistry. The central concept here is the bliss point.
Now, I've heard this term thrown around. It's basically about finding the perfect amount of sugar to make something taste good.
It's vastly more complex than just sugar. The bliss point is the exact mathematically modeled interplay of sugar, salt, and fat.
Yeah.
It creates a specific sensory profile that the human brain biologically does not have an evolutionary defense against.
Give me a specific mechanism for that. How exactly does a snack food hack the human brain?
Let's look at a concept called vanishing caloric density.
Vanishing caloric density.
This is a real functional term used in commercial food science. Take something like a cheese puff.
A Cheeto.
Right. You put it in your mouth. Instantly, it provides this massive, overwhelming explosion of salt and fat flavor. Your brain registers a high-reward caloric intake.
But then it just melts.
It melts. It practically disappears into nothing.
Feels like you're eating flavored air.
Exactly. And because the physical mass vanishes so quickly, your brain is fundamentally tricked. It thinks you haven't actually consumed anything substantial.
So the natural signal to stop eating never fires?
The satiety signal, that hormonal message sent from your gut to your brain saying, okay, I'm full, stop eating, it gets delayed or completely canceled.
Wow.
You can sit there and effortlessly consume 2,000 calories of this vanishing food, and your body will still physically feel hungry.
It's a complete biological override.
It is. And then, as if that wasn't enough, you add the exorphins.
Okay, this was the part of the audit that I literally had to reread twice.
Hmm.
Because we all know about endorphins.
Yeah.
The happy, natural chemicals our body makes when we exercise.
Right. Endo meaning internal.
So what are exorphins?
Exorphins are opioid peptides that are derived from outside sources. Exo, meaning external.
Opioid peptides.
Yes. Specifically, when certain highly processed proteins, things like heavily refined gluten or dairy casein, when they break down during digestion, they create these specific peptides.
Okay.
And these peptides are capable of crossing the blood-brain barrier. When they do, they actually bind to the exact same opioid receptors in your brain as morphine or heroin.
They actually bind to the opioid receptors. That is insane.
They do. Now, the effect is obviously much milder. You don't eat a bagel and start hallucinating.
Right.
But you do get a distinct, measurable sensation of mild sedation and pleasure. It is a literal chemical hook.
So when you say you're craving a specific brand of pizza or highly processed bread, you aren't just hungry for fuel.
No, your body is actually going through a very mild chemical withdrawal.
That completely reframes the entire obesity epidemic.
Completely.
It's not a massive society-wide failure of willpower.
It's a wild success of biochemical engineering.
It is a system working exactly as it was designed to work.
And this leads directly into the core economic paradox that the report highlights about our food system. We are simultaneously overfed and entirely undernourished.
The hidden hunger.
Right. People are consuming record amounts of daily calories. But because of massive soil depletion and aggressive monocropping over the last century, the actual macronutrient density of our food has completely plummeted.
The magnesium, the zinc, the vitamins.
Exactly. It's just not in the soil anymore, so it's not in the plant. So you are eating all this empty volume. Your microscopic cells are literally starving for basic building blocks while your waistline continues to expand.
And when that physical breakdown inevitably happens, we enter the medical system.
We do.
Now, I want to be really clear here, and the report is very careful about this too. This is not an attack on individual doctors or nurses.
Not at all.
It is an objective audit of the business model and the economic incentives driving the industry.
It's purely an audit of incentives. If you look at any large-scale publicly traded business, What is the single most valuable type of customer?
A repeat customer on a subscription.
Exactly. Now, apply that to the medical industry. A permanently cured patient is functionally a churned customer. They stop paying into the system.
Right.
The acute model of medicine, like setting a broken leg or removing an appendix, that is relatively low profitability over the long term. The astronomical profitability lies entirely in chronic care management.
The subscription model of health.
Precisely. If the system can diagnose you with a manageable metabolic disorder or chronic hypertension.
Conditions which are ironically often caused by the engineered food system we just talked about.
Exactly. If they can put you on a daily maintenance drug for the next 30 years, you are a gold mine. You have a massive lifetime value, or LTV, to the shareholders of that system.
So the food system manufactures the chronic pathology,
Yeah.
and then the pharmaceutical system steps in to manage the symptoms indefinitely.
And capital just flows in a perfect closed loop.
And neither side of that equation has any financial incentive whatsoever to actually break the loop.
If everyone in the country suddenly started fasting and eating only nutrient-dense regenerative agriculture produce, the nation's GDP would actually tank.
Because true, resilient health is fundamentally bad for the metric of economic growth.
Which brings us perfectly to the actual engine of that growth. Segment 3,
The mechanics of money.
the fiat and debt system.
Honestly, this was the section of the audit that made me realize I have basically been completely financially illiterate my entire adult life.
You're really not alone in that. Most people, even highly educated people working in finance, still operate on what the report calls the intermediary model.
Which is the idea that a bank is basically a warehouse.
Right, the safe deposit box theory.
I put my $1,000 in, the bank holds it safe for me, and then they lend my $1,000 out to someone else who needs it.
It feels very intuitive. It makes logical sense. But it is factually, legally, and mechanically incorrect. We do not operate on an intermediary system. We operate on a fractional reserve system. Or, more accurately, a credit creation system.
Okay, let's walk through the actual mechanics of a loan to explain this.
Let's do it.
Say I go down to the bank today because I want to buy a house for $500,000.
Okay.
I sit at the desk, I sign all the paperwork. What actually happens on the bank's internal computer system?
This is the magic trick of modern civilization.
Okay.
The bank does not go down to its vault to see if it has $500,000 in spare cash sitting around. It doesn't check other people's savings accounts to pool the money.
Right.
It simply opens its digital ledger. On one side of the ledger, it records your signed mortgage contract as an asset for the bank because you have legally promised to pay them back. On the other side of the ledger, it creates a liability. That liability is the deposit they just made into your checking account. The bank teller literally just types plus $500,000 into your account.
Wait, they just type it?
They type it. That $500,000 did not exist anywhere in the universe 5 seconds ago. It was birthed into existence out of thin air entirely by your signature on the loan document.
So modern money is literally created as debt, out of nothing.
Out of nothing but a legal promise.
Okay, I can wrap my head around the creation part, but the report goes further. It talks about this thing called the debt trap, a structural, mathematical impossibility built into the system.
Here is where the math gets incredibly brutal.
Walk me through it.
So the bank created the principal amount for you, the $500,000.
Right.
But according to the contract you signed, you don't just owe the bank the principal, you owe the principal plus interest.
Yes.
Let's say over a 30-year mortgage, you end up owing a total of $800,000 back to the bank.
A very standard mortgage scenario.
Okay, so the bank mathematically created the $500,000 into the money supply when you signed. But who created the other $300,000 to cover the interest?
I mean, nobody did.
Nobody. It was never created. That interest money literally does not exist in the macro system.
So how can I possibly pay it back?
The only way you can pay your interest is if you go out into the economy and outcompete other people to capture some of their money.
Right, okay.
But where did their money come from? It had to come from someone else taking out a new loan, creating new debt, and bringing new money into the system.
Oh my God, it's a giant game of musical chairs.
It is a ruthless game of musical chairs, but it's a game where the bank removes a chair every single round, yet legally demands that everyone still finds a seat.
And the only way to keep the game going without everyone losing
Is to constantly add more chairs, to constantly inject more debt into the system.
This perfectly explains the absolute macroeconomic obsession with constant growth. We aren't growing our economies because we necessarily want to or because it improves human happiness. We are growing because we mathematically have to.
If the perpetual growth stops, if people and governments suddenly stop taking on new debt, the money supply begins to shrink.
Right.
And because there isn't enough total cash in the system to service all the outstanding interest, defaults begin to cascade.
A chain reaction.
A total chain reaction. The whole system collapses inward. We are stuck on a treadmill that must continuously speed up forever just to prevent us from falling flat on our faces.
And what happens to the currency when we are forced to speed the treadmill up? Inflation.
Which the audit completely reframes. It's not just a natural economic weather event, it is a hidden tax.
Because most people think inflation just means, shop owners being greedy and prices going up.
That is merely the symptom. The underlying mechanical cause is something called the Cantillon effect.
The Cantillon effect. Unpack that.
When new money is printed by the central bank, or created by commercial banks through massive loans, that new money has to enter the physical economy somewhere.
It doesn't just fall evenly from the sky.
No, it enters at specific points. Usually it goes directly to the major banks, defense contractors, the government itself, or massive corporations first.
They are the spigot.
Right, and they get to spend that newly created money at today's current purchasing value, before the broader market has realized the money supply has expanded.
So they buy up assets while things are still cheap.
Exactly. But by the time that newly created money finally trickles down to you, say through a tiny wage increase a year later, the broad market has completely adjusted to the expanded supply.
The prices of groceries and housing have already gone up.
Right. You, the average wage earner, and the prudent saver are always the very last person to touch the new money.
So my purchasing power was silently diluted to fund the entities who got access to the new money first.
Precisely. If you worked hard and saved $10,000 of your physical labor, and then the central authority decides to double the overall money supply out of thin air, they have functionally stolen half of the value of your stored labor.
And they did it without ever physically walking into my house to take it.
It is a direct wealth transfer, a tax on your life energy that requires zero legislation and zero voting.
It's brilliant, honestly, in a completely terrifying way.
It is flawlessly systemic.
Man. Okay, so we've done the invisible systems. The digital tracking, the biochemical loops, the imaginary debt money.
Right.
Let's shift gears and look at the actual physical systems.
Yeah.
Segment 4, the physical and genetic frontier.
This section of the audit really forces a massive shift in how you perceive scale.
Let's start with space, because we all grow up with this very poetic, almost religious idea of the heavens.
Vast, infinite, distant, untouchable.
Right. It feels incredibly far away.
But physically speaking, in terms of actual kilometers, space is right there. It's shockingly close.
The Kármán line.
The Kármán line. That is the internationally recognized physical boundary where the Earth's atmosphere ends and outer space begins.
And how far up is it?
It is exactly 100 kilometers above sea level.
Which is just 62 miles.
62 miles. If you could point your Honda Civic completely vertical and drive upwards at normal highway speeds, you would cross into the vacuum of outer space in less than 1 hour.
I have a daily commute that takes longer than that.
Most people do. The entire biosphere, the only known zone in the universe where human life is biologically possible, is not this vast, endless domain that can absorb infinite punishment.
It's tiny.
It is an incredibly thin, fragile film clinging to the surface of a rock. The report uses an amazing visualization. If the Earth were the size of an apple, the entire atmosphere that protects us would be thinner than the skin of that apple.
That mental image really drives home the environmental fragility. We aren't just blowing exhaust into an endless, infinite sky.
No, we are essentially hotboxing a very small, tightly sealed room, and the volume of that room is way smaller than our intuition tells us.
And what's wild is that we are doing this while simultaneously, right now, learning how to rewrite the foundational code of the life forms locked inside that room with us.
Which brings us to the genetic frontier. CRISPR and gene drives.
Now, we've briefly touched on CRISPR before on this show, the genetic scissors that let scientists cut and paste DNA.
Right.
But the report introduces a concept called gene drives, which was completely new to me. And honestly, it sounds like science fiction.
It is a mechanism that fundamentally breaks the natural rules of Mendelian inheritance.
Break that down. What is Mendelian inheritance?
Basic high school biology. If a mosquito develops a random genetic mutation in the wild, it only passes that mutated trait to roughly 50% of its offspring.
A coin flip?
A natural coin flip. So a new trait spreads very slowly, if it spreads at all. It takes thousands of generations to change a species.
Okay, so how does a gene drive change that?
A gene drive is an engineered genetic copy-paste tool. We don't just insert a new trait into an animal, we insert the CRISPR machinery itself into the animal's DNA.
Wait, what does that do?
When that modified animal mates with a wild animal, the gene drive actively creates an enzyme inside the fertilized egg.
Okay.
That enzyme seeks out the unmodified chromosome from the wild parent, physically cuts it open, and copies the engineered trait over.
It forces the edit onto the partner's DNA?
Yes. It overwrites the natural genetics. So instead of a 50% chance, 100% of the offspring inherit the engineered trait.
100%.
And then 100% of their offspring inherit it.
That is an exponential spread.
It's a biological chain reaction. We literally possess the technology right now to release a few thousand lab-grown mosquitoes that are genetically programmed to produce sterile females.
And the drive forces that sterility trait through the whole population.
Exactly. And within just a few generations, maybe a couple of years, the entire species across an entire continent simply ceases to exist. They reproduce themselves into extinction.
We are fully crossing the line from just observing natural evolution to actively directing it.
We are becoming the absolute architects of the biosphere. But as we just established with the behavioral tracking and the infinite debt traps, do we actually trust the current architects?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it? And it leads us perfectly into the final pillar of the audit, the actual human structure that oversees and manages all of this complexity.
Segment 5, societal control and systemic fragility.
This section pulls everything we've talked about back down to the daily human experience.
Yeah.
The report does a deep analysis of the education-to-employee pipeline.
And it makes a very controversial argument here. It states that the massive blind spots in modern public education are not accidents or failures of funding.
They are design features.
Think about everything we just laid out, the mathematical debt trap of fiat currency and the precise psychology of addiction engineered into our food and screens.
Right.
These are arguably the two most powerful dictatorial forces shaping a modern adult's daily life: financial pressure and constant psychological manipulation.
Without a doubt.
And yet, a person can spend 16 solid years inside the formal education system, get a university degree, and never once be taught the actual mechanics of how money is created or how their own dopamine receptors are being hijacked.
It's genuinely absurd when you frame it like that. Why is that left out?
Because the modern schooling system is heavily based on the 19th century Prussian model of education.
The industrial age model.
Exactly. It was strictly designed to produce compliant factory workers and obedient soldiers. People who possess the exact correct temperament to follow instructions, sit still at a desk for 8 hours a day, and perform repetitive, specialized tasks without asking macro-level questions.
I mean, if you actually sat a teenager down and clearly taught them the mechanics of fractional reserve banking and compound interest,
they might realize the game is rigged. They might refuse to take out the $80,000 student loan, which means they don't get the degree, which means they don't get the corporate job, which means they don't become a compliant taxpayer servicing the national debt.
the system requires their ignorance to function.
And if you teach them the rigorous psychology of algorithmic propaganda and sensory addiction, they become immune to modern advertising.
The consumer economy stalls out.
The entire economic engine relies on the population being exactly educated enough to pull the levers and push the buttons, but nowhere near educated enough to question why the machine was built in the first place.
Which creates this entirely new societal divide. The report calls it the digital class system.
It's a profound new stratification, and it's not strictly about who has fiat wealth and who doesn't.
It's about technical agency.
Right. It divides society into two distinct classes: the admins and the users.
The admins being the people who actually understand the underlying code.
Yes. The software code, the legal code, the genetic code, the financial code. The admins write the rules of the system.
And the users just interact with the system via the provided interface.
Precisely. The users only see the glossy screen, the flashy app, the polished political debate. They don't see the back end. And if you cannot read the source code of the reality you live in, you are entirely subject to the whims of the people who can.
You are playing a game where someone else secretly wrote the rulebook.
And the final point the audit makes on this societal structure, and this is the part that really keeps you up at night, is how incredibly precariously brittle the whole thing is.
Just-in-time fragility.
Right. We have optimized every single supply chain on Earth purely for maximum capital efficiency. We systematically removed all the slack, all the buffers from the system.
Because holding extra inventory is seen as inefficient capital.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Warehouses don't hold 3 months of grain or medicine anymore. That costs money. They hold exactly enough for the next few days, relying on complex predictive algorithms to deliver the next shipment right as the last one runs out, just in time.
So what is the actual timeline if something snaps?
The report calculates that the average major metropolitan city operates on roughly a 72-hour supply of food.
3 days.
3 days. If the trucking logistics algorithms get hit by a cyber attack, or the digital payment processing grid goes offline, or there's a regional power cascade.
The grocery store shelves are completely bare in 72 hours.
Gone. We have built an unbelievably complex machine that is highly efficient at delivering fresh avocados from Mexico to a supermarket in Canada in the dead of winter.
But it has zero immune system.
Zero. It possesses almost no natural resilience against a sudden systemic shock.
It's like a Formula One race car.
Yeah.
It is incredibly fast and hyper-optimized.
But if it hits a single pothole at speed, it violently disintegrates into 1,000 pieces.
Whereas like a rusty old farm tractor is slow, but it's indestructible.
And we decided to build an entire global civilization out of race cars.
Wow. So we have audited the system, we've looked at the stateless digital surveillance, the chemical addiction loops, the infinite mathematical debt, the genetic tinkering, and this hyper-fragile societal structure.
It's a lot to process.
It's incredibly heavy, it feels completely overwhelming, so what do we actually do with this?
Right.
The stated mission of this deep dive at the beginning was to transition the listener from a subject to an actor. How does just knowing all this terrifying stuff actually help achieve that?
Because, simply put, knowledge breaks the spell.
Explain what you mean by that.
The absolute power of every single system we just discussed relies entirely on your unconscious participation.
Okay.
You only become hopelessly addicted to the vanished density food if you don't realize the bliss point was mathematically engineered in a lab to trick you.
Right.
You only get trapped in the algorithmic echo chamber if you mistakenly believe the search engine is an objective library.
You only lose your labor to inflation if you obediently keep all your wealth sitting in fiat cash.
Exactly. Once you clearly see the hidden mechanism, the illusion loses its power over you. You can begin to navigate around it.
So it's about making conscious choices.
It is. You can opt out, you can learn to cook whole, single-ingredient foods, you can aggressively diversify your assets outside of the fractional reserve system.
You can actively seek out source material instead of reading curated feeds.
You can learn basic code. You can understand the legal contracts you sign. You can step out of the user interface and begin to act as an admin in your own life.
That is the actual path to autonomy.
It is the only path. The architecture of modern reality isn't going to suddenly vanish. The race car is still driving. But once you understand how the engine works, you don't have to just be a helpless passenger anymore.
Man, I want to leave the listener with one final thought. Something that has been rattling around in my own head ever since I finished reading this audit.
Go for it.
We've established today that your digital history is just an editable variable on a server. Your physical hunger is chemically engineered by food scientists. Your money is a completely imaginary number generated by a debt ledger. And your daily news feed is a custom curated hall of mirrors.
It is a synthetic reality, top to bottom.
So the fundamental question you have to ask yourself tonight is this. If every single input of your daily life has been deliberately engineered by someone else, how much of your actual lived reality is truly yours?
That is the real question.
Think about that. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today. We'll see you all next time.